Hi, welcome to What in the World is Going On. Today we're going to discuss, do blacks have a culture? Since 1691, the beginning of slavery, Africans have been demeaned by various racial labels, primarily for the purpose of free labor, the enrichment of Caucasians, and the building of America. Those tasks were not easy for Africans. They were bred by Caucasians to adapt to a way of living that was very inhumane. Africans were denied the right to speak their language. They had to learn American English by adapting to Southern Caucasian verbiage. They were denied the right to read, write, or show any intelligent comprehension of the English language during that time. These denials of human rights was a form of breeding that created an inferiority complex in Africans. Africans were tortured by whips, chained, raped, limbs amputation, and other unimaginable tragedies. Africans were subject to hard labor such as cropping tobacco, picking cotton, rice farming, and other manual labor 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week under harsh weather conditions. At the end of the workday, life was just as rough. Africans had to live in wooden shacks, uninsulated. They had to endure very hot weather during the summer and cold weather during the winter, while sleeping on hard wooden floors. The unalienated rights for Africans were denied completely by Caucasians. Please notice that Africans were not considered Americans during this time, just property from 1691 to 1865. Officially, Africans were emancipated in 1865, but still they were not acknowledged as Americans. The 40 acres and a mule was rescinded by Andrew Johnson, President Lincoln's successor, which was the 40 acres and a mule was granted by General William Sherman and accepted by President Abraham Lincoln. Africans were still considered niggers in the eyes of Caucasians. With all the psychological and physical damage Africans had to endure, none hurt worse than the inferiority complex embedded in their mind. For a thorough understanding of what the African American went through during slavery, I would suggest you read Lerone Bennett Jr.'s book, Before the Mayflower. Now, the term nigger or Negro was given to the African. It came from the Greek word necro, meaning black, nothing, void of light, dead person, corpse. In reality, Africans were considered all of the above. Had Senator Harry Reid chosen to defend his word choice, he would have cited some formidable authorities. Colored was the preferred term for black Americans until W.E.B. Du Bois, following the lead of Booker T. Washington, advocated for a switch to Negro in the 1920s. Negro was a white coined word intended to marginalize black people. Senator Harry Reid apologized for his comments made before the 2008 elections, that Barack Obama could win in part because he was a light-skinned African American with no Negro dialect. Reid, who was resisting calls for his resignation, described the gaffe as a poor choice of words. The term Negro started its decline in 1966 and was totally uncomfortable by the mid-1980s. The turning point came when Stokely Carmichael coined the phrase Black Power at a 1966 rally in Mississippi. Until then, Negro was how most black Americans described themselves. In Carmichael's speech and in his landmark 1967 book, Black Power, The Politics of Liberation in America, persuasively argued that the term Negro implied black inferiority. Among black activists, the term Negro soon became shorthand for a member of the establishment. Black publications like Ebony switched from Negro to black at the end of the decade, and the masses soon followed. According to a 1968 Newsweek poll, more than two-thirds of black Americans still preferred Negro, but black had become the majority preference by 1974. The Associated Press and the New York Times abandoned Negro in the 1970s, and by the mid-1980s, even the most hardbound institutions, like the U.S. Supreme Court, has largely stopped using Negro. In 1988, after the Black Power movement had itself faded, many leaders decided another semantic change was required. Jesse Jackson led the push toward African American. But so far, the change is not seen to have the same momentum that Negro and black once had. In various polls, most black interviewees expressed no preference between black and African Americans, and most publications did not recommend use of one over the other. It was challenging for institutions and old people who have seen racial terms come and go during their lifetime to adapt. The NAACP, founded in 1909, declined to change its name during this time, but did stop using colored and all other derogatory terms used for Africans, even though they did not take the word colored out of NAACP. Negro History Week began in 1926. It was changed to Black History Month in 1976. The United Negro College Fund was not trying to emphasize its initials. They resumed their full name. The last time the Supreme Court used the word Negro, marked the citation to other scholarships, was in 1985. The writer was Justice Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice, who came up in the 20s during the time of Du Bois. Despite public outcry, the U.S. Census included the word Negro because many other people still used it. The term Negro was first used in the 1900 census and did not cease to exist on the census until around 2010. Lerone Bennett Jr., that great author, in his book, What's in a Name? Negro versus African American versus Black, he quoted Lewis Carroll's book, Through the Looking Glass. He quoted, "When I use a word," Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, "it means just what I choose it, neither more nor less. The question is," said Alice, "whether you can make words mean so many different things." "The question is," said Humpty Dumpty, "which is to be master, that's all." So concretely, within the context of the racial looking glass, the question is whether one can make the word Negro mean so many different things, or whether one should abandon it and use the word Black or African American. This question is at the root of a national controversy over the proper designation for identifiable Americans of African descent. Here is my view. Let us examine the definition of culture, the customary beliefs, social forms, the material trace of a racial, religious, or social group. Also the characteristic features of everyday existence, such as diversions or way of life, shared by people in a place or time. A set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. African American lineage is easily traceable back to African roots. This is based on our characteristics, features, everyday existence, such as divergence, our way of life shared by people of the African continent. Let us not forget that Africa was colonized during the same time that slavery was going on here in America. Colonization for Africans throughout the world created an inferiority complex on the minds of Africans everywhere in the world. Africans, regardless of a brother from Jamaica, America, Brazil, or the Caribbeans have to acknowledge the African continent in order to truly have freedom. Africa is the largest continent in the world, which consists of 54 countries. Through this 2024 depression, Africa is making progress in terms of GDP and development of the infrastructure. Africa is willing to accept Africans around the world and have the willingness to work with the lost generations regarding unity. Africans in the diaspora are independent of each other. Their cause is to fight for equality and not freedom in their own colonizations. This type of thinking indicates that you do not know who you are as a person or a people. You would much rather be like the colonizer. They enjoy having equality over freedom. Equality is wanting to be like or equal with someone else's agenda, inclusiveness. Freedom is having the ability to think for oneself and perform with an open mind. Many Africans of the diaspora have no desire to connect and associate themselves with the African continent due to an inferiority complex. My mother would call these individuals dead to the world, meaning regardless of education or social status, they have a lack of understanding of who they are and live willy-nilly, or shall I say, without the purpose of unity amongst other Africans. These individuals are forever addressing the silly season. They live for material gains, good times, and social status wherever they can find it. They leave behind no thought for African unity and freedom for future American generations, wherever they may be in the world. Culture identifies positively who you are as an individual and a people. If you deny your culture, you deny the success, security, and unity of your offsprings. As we read in the beginning of this text, Africans were brought to America as slaves. They were not Negroes, colored, or black. They were Africans. Africans, our ancestors, were the ones who endured slavery and laid the foundation for freedom by revolt, uprising, and eventually by fighting in the Civil War of 1861 to overcome the oppression. I say to you today, embrace your culture and be proud to be African. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe.